Hello, everybody. Give me a second as we tweet all this out. One. This one. And boom. There we go. People know. Oh, need Discord up too. My bad. Sorry, guys. It takes a minute to get everything set up, and then we'll get the pre-show going. And then I think we're good. There we are. There we are. Okay. Yay. Okay, we're just waiting for people to get here, and then we'll start up the pre-show. Actually, I need to dig out the agenda because I keep forgetting to do that. So welcome, everybody. Hopefully everybody's had a good week. For those who sent the well wishes, thank you very much. I am feeling a lot better. I'll still cough and sniffle here and there, but I'm getting better. So I'll take my victories where I can get up. And tonight we have a little bit of a mixture, so you guys can look forward to some good news as well as, unfortunately, some bad. We do have things like the Shenmue remasters to talk about, as well as the Nintendo talk for an unusual patent that Nintendo is filing. The bad news is that we're going to be talking about the kerfuffle that was Bully Hunters. We're going to be talking about the unfortunate Wichita swatter Tyler Barris has been seen in the Twitter sphere again, even though he's in prison. We're also going to be talking about the unfortunate final nail in the coffin of Channel Awesome. But thankfully, I think we're going to be able to wrap things up in a more positive light. So there's going to be lots of stuff for people to take in tonight. We hope you guys enjoy. In the meantime, though, since Alex is here, let's go ahead and get the pre-show started and talk about the stories that didn't make the agenda this week. Not because they're not as important, but the bottom line is that there were other things that I felt would mesh better together in this particular agenda. And the first one that I want to get into, because people want to know Alex's direct opinion on the matter. By the way, hello, Alex.
Hello.
The first one we're going to get into is the Mega Drive Mini getting announced. And I don't think we have too much information on it. In fact, I think you found additional information that confirmed that it's not being made by the best hardware. So
no. By the sound of it, they're using a company that made similar Mega Drive Minis before.
Yep.
And by the sound of it, their tech is very inferior. There's a lot of problems. There have been games that saw a lot of games soft locked. There's been game breaking bugs. And the only good thing I've heard come out of it was, hey, the controllers were surprisingly good.
Okay, well, at least they got something right. You know, that's one way to look at it. That something is not that important as the actual console working, but I guess we'll take our victories where we can get them. By the way, make sure to join in the discussion on our Discord server if you want to be able to do that. Yeah, I don't know really what to think on this one because, again, I haven't been the biggest fan, and to much confrontation with some people, I haven't been the biggest fan of the mini consoles. Let's just put them that way. The NES Classic Mini, the SNES Classic Mini, I'm just not a fan. And even we got a mini Atari coming, right?
I don't know, actually.
I could have sworn we had a mini Atari coming. And so at that point, I've just not been a fan of any of them. And one of my biggest problems has been the limited game library. And I don't even think, correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, I don't even think the story gives us a game library for it, does it?
I don't know. Let me look.
I don't think it does. And considering the Genesis collection that just barely got announced and its lackluster library, I'm not optimistic about this one. And welcome, Stephen Romney. And you can actually comment on this one. So, thoughts on the Sega Genesis Classic Mini?
If it's anything like any of the other, Sega mini consoles that games put out, then I'm not really all that phased.
No, not really. I mean, it's disappointing is more than anything. Just because I've been disappointed by all the Nintendo mini consoles, and from what I understand, we've got another one. I think there's a rumor going around that this holiday season, we're either going to get the Game Boy Mini or we're going to get the N64 Mini.
This holiday season.
This summer.
Yeah. The main thing to keep in mind, the AT Games consoles, they've been around for a while that I bought on impulse, and they're just not that good. I mean, yeah, you get a whole bunch of games, but for about the price you pay for that, you can just buy the PS3 Genesis collection, or actually for cheaper, for like $20, and get pretty much all the games that actually run decently.
And and correct me if I'm wrong, a much bigger library out of that PS3 one, not the PS4 one that people might be thinking of. That's a limited library. I actually think the PS3 one has a bigger library than that.
Yeah, because the PS3 one wasn't designed with online cloud capability in mind. Yeah. It was basically meant, okay, well, here's all the games for you to play, go nuts. Whereas digital distribution, well, they're hoping to copy what Sega has on Steam.
Yeah, pretty much. So yeah, that's one of the stories that didn't make the agenda. Another one is, and the only reason I took it out, and maybe the panel will disagree with me on this, but I'm sick and tired of talking about YouTube. In all honesty, I really am. And we got an update to YouTube's 2018 priorities, as well as we've been seeing some bad news, especially from the really big creators. In particular, the one that Alex found was a video from Philip DeFranco and how he's starting to have issues, and he's starting to see a lot less views than he used to be able to get on regular videos. And I've already read the update to our priorities. The one thing I can glisten from it, aside from a bunch of, well, PR babble, is a lot of patting on the back of like, oh, we're so happy that we did this, and we're so happy that we've got this, but we're still working on other things. In particular, I noticed that the panel, which I think all of us kind of confirmed on this one, that panel was going to be really small for those who actually met the new requirements of YouTube, and you had to get reviewed to be able to receive your partner program and your monetization. And they just barely confirmed in there that the team's not that big, and they haven't been able to handle all of the requests coming in. We've even seen friends and fellow YouTubers, they've hit the requirements 1 month, they didn't get reviewed, and the next month they didn't meet requirements. So at that point, they do actually admit that, yes, it's been difficult for our team, and we are looking to expand on it. Not we are going to expand on it and we've got 10 other people, we're looking to expand on that team. So you're looking forward to that, as well as the fact that they're happy that they're getting some of their advertisers back. But all of it is because of all of the bullcrap they've been putting their creators through. So basically it's YouTube patting itself on the back and kind of sucking at it. And yeah, it's just, I hate to be Mr. Doom and Gloom here, people, but it is more doom and gloom from YouTube. It's looking more and more, if Philip DeFranco is having issues maintaining any kind of monetization or any kind of living on YouTube, then I don't think too many others can. Unless I've got that wrong, Alex.
I don't know. Either way, I'm probably fucked because everyone else can move to live streaming and whatnot. I can't.
Yeah.
Nothing I do really works for live streaming, and I'm absolutely terrible at it. So
yeah, it's definitely one of those things of, in order to be able to make this work, you now have to go to somewhere else to be able to make a living off of what you like doing. And unfortunately, if you don't stream, let's just say for the sake of argument, Romney does film reviews. He could probably go to streaming, but he doesn't want to. He wants to do film reviews. Alex does anime reviews. This doesn't help. I mean, that's why Romney has been experimenting with Facebook. And I'm not sure if Romney can hear us.
I don't know. Even then,
so.
Given everything that's happened lately, I think any hopes of Facebook becoming a new possible viable streaming competitor is gone.
No, well, the problem is that you don't want a streaming competitor. You want an episodic competitor. That's the content that you create.
I mean, not necessarily just streaming. I just mean any kind of video hosting site in general. Just that's what I meant, not necessarily streaming. So
yeah.
So any hopes that just with recent events, that's not going to be the case with Facebook anymore.
I mean, you could technically do Amazon, or not Amazon, but you could do Twitch, because they will let you keep episodic content. You just basically have to do it the way that they say it. You have to premiere it, and then at that point, people can ask you questions and stuff like that. So that would work for you. And I could actually say that from a streaming perspective, that wouldn't tax your PC too much, but it's streaming, so you'd have to learn how to do it. You'd have to be able to do it consistently, and then that's just what you have to do. You have to premiere your videos, and then people get to see the video after.
I did just download OBS, so I need to start playing with it some. Well, I've played with it. I've tinkered around. I haven't done any actual streaming with it, though.
Yeah, that's the difference. It's like you can put things up on Twitch, but it's either Twitch or Amazon, one of the two. You can do it, but you have to premiere it. So at that point, like, you have to be there, then show it, and then, sit there for like an hour and answer questions from people.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what you're restricted to. But, if people can't get the general gist of this, YouTube's screwing people again, and they're actually kind of making it not viable. If people were hoping for the whole dream of I can do this because I see a bunch of people who do this and don't have a lick of experience, even though they kind of do, and they get millions of subscribers and therefore are rich and don't have to go work a daytime job. That's not possible anymore. And in fact, you're starting to see a lot of those guys who hit it big going into other avenues, going into other venues to be able to get money. So that's the reality here. Is unfortunately it's not possible anymore.
Yeah.
Which sucks for creators like me and Alex, because this is the kind of content that we want to provide, and unfortunately can't do it. I would actually even dare say that I just barely saw a YouTube video basically saying that the era of the angry review is over on YouTube anyway, because for as much actual work as goes into, say, a angry video game nerd or a nostalgia critic video goes, you're officially not making that money back the way that this is going. You're officially not making back the budget. And that's sad, especially considering that, Alex's, I can't speak for, I can speak for mine. I'm guessing Alex's budget, fairly cheap.
Oh yeah.
Fairly
Pretty
cheap.
cheap.
So yeah, mine, fairly cheap. And that's just the way I can do it. So if you were looking to make a living off of this, no, this is your hobby now. This is officially your hobby. Enjoy your 9 to 5 grind kind of thing. And that sucks. Let's see. Moving on into the next story that we have that didn't make the agenda tonight. We are happy to say that the Steam version of Chrono Trigger has been patched, and it is looking improved. So I'm not too certain on the issues that the Steam version had, because I already have a version of Chrono Trigger and I'm not downloading it again. But Alex, do you want to go into that a little bit?
We talked about this. I don't know why you're not certain about it.
I haven't downloaded. I'm not certain about it because I haven't downloaded the Steam version.
We talked about it. That's my point. So everything that was basically the Steam version was ported from the mobile version, which looked awful. It had really bad the subtitles were like in basic Arial font. The graphics were, I can't remember exactly what the graphics were, but it was a crappy port from another crappy port that rather than being ported from a SNES ROM. So
Okay.
that's why people were upset with it. And I don't know why you won't download it again.
What was that?
I know you own it, but that doesn't mean you can't buy it again.
I'm not going to buy it mobile.
Yeah, not mobile.
I like at the very most, I'd get the DS remake. But here's the thing, guys. I'm not going to I love Chrono Trigger. I don't have to own 4 different versions of it. I'm happy owning the one that I have. For the longest time, that was the SNES cartridge. And now it's my PlayStation disc that I have Final Fantasy Chronicles that combines Final Fantasy IV as well as Chrono Trigger. I don't necessarily need to have it other than that, because that one to me is kind of the penultimate version. It has the anime cutscenes, and that's really all I want as far as improvement.
Except most people would disagree. Most people would call that pretty inferior because it's
fine. They are allowed to have that opinion. I don't agree, and I'm moving on from it.
It's got really low. It's good, and I have that version, and I love playing it still. But it's got really bad load times. It's got mired sound
I hate
effects.
to break this to you, but the PlayStation had really bad load times.
Yeah, so there you go.
So,
that's what I'm saying.
That's not a worthwhile reason to me, because you're already talking about a console that had that issue. So if at that point that was your issue, then you bought the wrong console, people.
Good luck getting your hands on a SNES cartridge and not having to pay 2 arms and
now you don't have to, because you can get the SNES Classic and it has it. You can get your SNES Classic, which is even more limited. You can get your hands on the DS cartridge. That's what I'm saying here, people, is that I don't need to own 4 different versions of a game that I love. I'm more than happy owning one of them, because then I can go and revisit however I want to. Now, granted, I've kind of wanted to get my hands on the DS cartridge, mainly because of the ending that is given. Because it's an ending that basically tries to bridge Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross closer together, and I'd like to be able to have that. What was that?
Too little, too late, in my opinion.
I would agree with you.
I mean, looking at Chrono Cross, it feels like it's an original game that somebody decided should become a Chrono Trigger sequel after the fact. It's like one of those. Hey, we got this great original idea here. Let's just make it a Chrono Trigger sequel. Nobody will know the difference.
I'm not necessarily saying you're wrong. We're talking a lot of games in this particular era that kind of happened, where eventually, another one that comes to my mind in that particular era that happened was one that you're familiar with called Project Dream, and that eventually became Banjo-Kazooie.
That's not quite the same thing. You're talking one original project that got transformed into a different project. I'm talking like...
Then that's exactly what I'm talking about, Alex.
No, shut up for 3 seconds, goddammit.
You know what? You tell me to shut up for 3 seconds. I'm not going to shut up now, am I?
What? No, what I'm saying, you're talking about Project Dream was an original project that got reimagined as a totally different original project. I'm talking about like the Star Fox GameCube route, where that was an original project that got re-envisioned as an existing IP. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about one original project getting reimagined.
We're going to agree to disagree on this one. And the main reason being is that's not the definition that you stated. You're correcting yourself there, buddy. You're correcting yourself.
That is the definition that I stated.
No, you are correcting yourself enough. And so that's my bottom line. Your actual comparison that you made later would have made a little bit more sense. But the bottom line is you said it at a different precedent already.
No, I didn't. I said it exactly that. This was a new project.
Moving on into it. You are correct in the fact that, yes, this is basically a brand spanking new property that was basically slapped onto something else. I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I can't even remember the history of Chrono Cross. I don't know if the original creators... Well, I know that Toriyama wasn't involved. Sakaguchi, I think, was involved in an advisory role. So at that point, it wasn't going to be him. I know that Uematsu provided, I think, 1 or 2 tracks in that soundtrack. So at that point,
it's mostly Mitsuda.
Yeah, it's Mitsuda that did most of that work. So at that point, I'm guessing, brand spanking new creator. And at that point, they said, "Well, this is vague. We'll slap Chrono on it." I'm not saying that you're wrong. I just don't know if that's necessarily what happened. I don't remember the history.
Well, look, I don't know that happened either. That's just the way I feel about it. Is Chrono Cross feels like a totally different story that got arbitrarily made into a Chrono game for marketing purposes, even though I don't think that's the case. Because I know it still had the same scenario writer, still had Masato Kato on board.
Okay.
And, but that's why I can't get behind Chrono Cross that much.
Well, I mean, I get that. Okay. And I get your argument on the matter. But this was the way they decided to go with it. They decided that with the DS version, they'd add in something different and have an ending that bridges those two games a little bit more. I'm not saying I disagree with you. I actually think that that is exactly what happened, and it was to try and get people to try out Chrono Cross. Somebody actually even, I think, pointed out at one point that the DS release coincided with the PSN release of Chrono Cross. I don't know that for a fact. I've never looked for Chrono Cross on PSN, so I don't even know if it's out on PSN. So at that point, but if you took that, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with you. If that was a way to try and get people to try out Chrono Cross, fine. That's the way it went. But bottom line is, I'm glad that the Steam version is getting some improvements. It sounds to me like it needed it. And
let's go back to the original UI. I don't like that. I don't like that stupid menu box up in the corner.
Oh, you mean in the mobile version?
In the Steam version. Because the Steam version just is carrying over from the mobile. Just now they're doing some patches here or there.
Yeah, that would be a little annoying to me. And that just screams to me, ooh, we have a touch screen. We might as well use it. So yeah, there you go. I'm glad that things are getting fixed. This one, Alex actually brought to our attention really quick. I'm just making sure that things are working for Romney. Unfortunately, it looks like we're having some internet issues. I'm having some, and he is too. So at that point, I don't know if he is not able to resolve that, we might not have a podcast tonight. But the next story that we have that didn't make the cut was Alex actually found this. Bandai Namco has trademarked Also Sprach Zarathustra in the US. So a lot of people might recognize that Xenosaga Episode 3 carries that exact title. And according to financials, it is considered to be the second most popular financially amongst the Xenosaga trilogy. The first actually being the one that got the most money out of it, second being the last. And it looks like there's talk that because of this trademark, they're looking to remake, at the very least, also Sprox Zarathustra.
I don't know if there's any real talks of remakes or remasters.
No, right now this is scuttlebutt is what this is, from what I can tell. This is scuttlebutt that people think because they're trademarking that they're going to remake it. I don't even know if you can, honestly. I mean, you could easily scale it up and port it. I think that would be more along the lines of what they're actually trying to do. But it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, considering that if you're going to remake one Xenosaga game, you might as well remake all three.
Yeah.
And again, my issue on the matter is that why do you take the third one, which granted, I don't have a problem with 3. I actually think 3 is probably the best out of that trilogy we got. But its story is so heavily condensed that I don't see that as an actual first entry that people can get into. That's my issue, is like they literally had to take the story of about 2 or 3 games and condense them all into one. So, that's a lot of story to go through, and people might not necessarily be all that patient. What's your take on it, Alex? Because, I mean,
I have no clue.
It's interesting that they're trademarking it, but
I guess usually a trademark sounds like they're doing something with the property. I don't know. I mean, maybe they neglected to trademark it the first time, and now they're just finally doing that to protect their property. I don't know.
I think they did the last time though, because they wanted to make. Because I remember around that time there was another game that was hinting at a Zarathustra in it, and so they wanted to trademark it to cover their ass, so that people knew, but it wouldn't have mattered because everybody would have known Xenosaga Episode 3. So that was another thing that didn't make a whole lot of sense. Another person brought to my attention when this happened, maybe what they're trying to do is they're trying to trademark Cosmos. So that, like with the added announcement that in Xenoblade 2, she's a bonus summon, is that there may be that they may be using that as a means to reintroduce the Cosmos saga into modern day consoles.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a buy, but
plus it's a tricky thing to copyright when you consider that Zarathustra is a religious figure.
Yeah.
It'd be like someone trying to copyright the name Jesus for a video game. For those of you who don't know, Zarathustra, also known as Zoroaster, is the main figure that is at the center of the religious philosophy Zoroastrianism, and thus why you have a lot of songs and literature making reference to Zoroaster or Zarathustra. I mean, most notably, we have the classical music piece Thus Spake Zarathustra from 2001: A Space Odyssey, which in turn is what the Xenosaga subtitle is also referencing. So it's a bit of a tricky thing to copyright here, unless they're copyrighting a specific way it's typed, a specific way it's written. Mm-hmm. It's tricky.
Oh, the writer is actually Tetsuya Takahashi. So at that point, maybe they're trademarking it so that he owns the Xeno series. That could be another way too. I think I know he owns the rights to Xenogears, or he has a credit to them. I don't think he has one to Xenosaga, but Xenoblade, I think he does. So maybe that's why. I don't know.
I think theoretically he'd already own it, but I don't know. I don't, because
what was that, Alex?
I would think theoretically he'd already own it just based on original creator intellectual property law, but
I'm not entirely sure, because like everything I've heard about Xenosaga is it's kind of that fucked up era of Namco where they tried to gain more. They wanted to try and gain more leverage on the IPs than the writers had, which is dumb and weird, and they stopped doing it. But it's PS2 era Bandai Namco. I can't confirm or deny any of that, but I have heard that like Bandai Namco was borderline tyrannical at one point in the PS2 era.
Yeah.
Because I think the other one that gets brought up that they tried to exert influence on was the Dot Hack games, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, Bandai Namco has had a hand in hand. I don't know how much.
Well, I think they tried to get like sole rights to any games that are made with .hack in them.
News to me, but they've kind of. I would think they'd already have that kind of right of first exclusion there, just because they are the original production committee part of.
Yeah, I was about to say they were part of the original production committee.
No. If somebody wants to clarify on it, I'd actually be very curious, because if Takahashi didn't actually own like all of the rights to also Sprox Zarathustra, that would be surprising, considering that technically that was the game where Bandai Namco said, we're pissed with you, and you don't get your additional 3 games, you get 1. And so he had to condense, and this is why I consider Takahashi to be the Anno of video games, because he always writes these big grandiose tales, and then unfortunately his games don't deliver. And or in some cases he doesn't take the fact that game executives aren't necessarily going to agree with his big grandiose story and say, no, you don't get 3 games, you get 1.
Yeah, so
this has happened a lot in his career.
So does that mean that this could basically be that their way of trying to trademark something to basically create a rebuild of Xenosaga?
Xenosaga was supposed to be a spiritual successor to Xenogears, and it was supposed to allow for Takahashi to explain Xenogears, and it didn't happen. And in fact, that's the funniest part about the Xeno series, and this is why they're never connected, is because as much as Takahashi tries to connect them, he misses parts. And so things don't necessarily click together. That's why in some cases I've seen him just go, F it, they're all spiritual successors. So Xenoblade is the spiritual successor to Xenogears and Xenosaga. Xenosaga is a spiritual successor to Xenogears. The look on Romney's face is his mind is officially blown.
Well, not really blown. It's just a case of, yeah, it's just the fact of how confusing it is. It's like, okay, I'm going to just stick with other franchises I can actually understand.
Yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and get this show on the road. I think we got everybody. If we have issues, I have made the proper offerings to the internet gods, and if that's not good enough, then, well, it's not good enough. So let me know when you guys are good to go.
Down speed.
Okay, 3, 2, 1. All right. Just got this on Twitter. I always like coming in when Alex and Adam are fighting. Sorry, not trying to fight.
Okay. Just pisses me off sometimes.
I'm starting to think that Atlas is right. We are married. We just didn't realize.
Yeah, just don't expect me to add the team marriage counselor to the already growing list of duties.
No, that would be K2SO, and K2SO would suck at it. Welcome, everybody, to another awesome episode of Geek News, Reviews, and Opinions, the podcast where we talk the week's events in Geek for Friday night, April 20th, 2018. The summer's almost upon us. I'm your host, Adam Mickelson, a.k.a. Drac. I hope everybody's had an awesome week so far. For me, thank you for all the well wishes and all that fun stuff. I am feeling a lot better. When you guys saw me last Friday, I was just barely starting antibiotics, so now I'm feeling a ton better, and thank you all so much for all the well wishes you sent out to me. I really do appreciate that. But we're not here to talk about me and my sick stuff. This is not an average everyday podcast. We're here to talk about the week's events in Geek. And to do that, we need our panel of fellow geeks, fellow YouTubers, fellow awesome guys in general, fellow critics, fellow reviewers, fellow fans. And let's go ahead and start things off with Stephen Romney of Studio Ghost Utah, of From the Shelf, Rhapsody in Cinema, Monster Clash, Martial March, which has officially ended. Romney, how you doing tonight?
Well, doing okay. I mean, this week was kind of crap, but, well, that's life. I mean, you get thrown a bunch of crap dealing with, well, I can't go into too much detail because, again, my work has me sign non-disclosure agreements, but,
yes,
well, at least nothing caught on fire. I'll leave it at that. At least nothing caught on fire. At least I have food. At least I have a roof over my head. And at least my car's not breaking.
These are all great things. And things that we all take for granted, and I'm glad that at least those things are there. And in fact, me and Alex can confirm fire is bad. So Speaking of Alex, we also have Alex the Shadow Blazer here, who, if you guys just barely watched the pre-show, apparently him and me have been married for who knows how many years. We didn't realize it. We forgot to tell my wife, and yeah, that's just how things roll. Alex, how you doing?
Doing fine otherwise. I'm again tired. It's been a crazy Friday morning for me at work, but here I am, still trooping it out for the podcast.
Yay! Geeky dedication at its finest. And so we actually are going to be talking the week's events in Geek. And to top things off for the tech hour for the first portion, we have a little bit of a kerfuffle that we can kind of laugh at, but at the same time, people might get mad at us for laughing at it. So you might have actually seen the advertisements that came out. I want to say it's passed over the last 2 weeks. I even saw I don't know about you guys. I saw a YouTube advertisement for this, and that was the announcement of the Bully Hunters campaign. So to try and explain this, I'm just going to go ahead and do a little bit of role play because people tend to enjoy that. So the way to explain the Bully Hunters campaign is this is how it works. We're going to have Romney here play Average Gamer. I am a bully, and I am bullying the crap out of Romney. I am making him feel bad, and I'm telling him that I'm going to do horrible things to his corpse as soon as I'm done in my COD match. What this campaign was supposed to be is that Romney could call a number or dial up a website and therefore ask for assistance from a bully hunter. Now, Alex steps in, and he is the bully hunter. So he comes in, he friends Romney, comes into his COD match, and his goal is one specific goal. He's not necessarily worried about the objectives on the map or anything like that. His goal is to take the person who was bullying Romney, aka me, and pummel them to death, roughly. Is to constantly snipe them, to give them the hardest time imaginable, so much so that they, quote, learn their lesson and never do it again. Now, that's the premise of Bully Hunters. Already, we can question a bunch of this stuff, but it's okay because we don't need to. Because when they actually launched their stream, they already had tons of kerfluffles and, well, cluster Fs that happened all amidst the launch of the Bully Hunter, so much so that as of right now, and as of most of the sites that actually covered it on the news, it is shut down. It literally existed 24 to 48 hours. And the reason being that it existed for so long is, first of all, it had a very lackluster launch. A lot of people are quoting the live stream where they had, I can't remember who it was, but a woman who was basically reading off of her cue cards and was constantly stuttering, having to do multiple takes. She obviously wasn't taking this live stream very seriously. Not only that, but you also had some of these bully hunters abusing other people. Not to mention all of the major flaws that actually exist within this Bully Hunter program. So a lot of people kind of realized that this was a less than lackluster idea to try and stop online harassment, and therefore shut down the project. Now, because we had so much fun on this, and actually a listener brought this to our attention because they watched the Amazon story, it's time for us to play that wonderful game of let's pick holes in this argument. You know,
where do we even begin?
So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take care of the most obvious one. Okay, because this one is obviously the one that everybody thinks of. So you're basically hiring a bully to bully a bully. And therefore make them a victim so that they will hire a bully hunter to be a bully for your bully. To quote Teddy Roosevelt, bully.
Does that mean if they have fuzzy headphones, does that make them a woolly bully?
Yes. Yes, just for the sake of it.
Bully, bully. Bully, bully.
Yeah,
bully,
like,
bully.
This is how bad I know a campaign is, okay? Alex can attest to this. My wife is neutral when it comes to anything online. Like when a new program comes in that I don't like, she's usually like, "Oh, it's probably not that bad. It's probably got its own system that will actually work." I put this thing on with some of the coverage that YouTube was doing of it. It's the first time ever I've seen my wife poke holes in the argument. She literally looked at the video and went, "So you're hiring a bully to bully this guy. Like, yeah, pretty much. That's what they're doing. Isn't that going to make the bully a victim and therefore you're the bully? Yes. In fact, that's what it is. Not to mention the fact that the signing on process for this wasn't that hard. From what I understand, if you wanted to sign on to be a bully hunter, it didn't take a whole lot to convince all you had to basically show, from what I understand, was your gaming prowess and maybe even some achievements. And then you would get brought in and you would be a bully hunter. So basically you could be a bully and a troll, get brought into the bully hunters program and bully the person who brought you in. Another hole in the argument.
Yeah.
Not to mention the fact that one of the biggest representative streamers, Natalie Zombie Unicorn Casanova, she sent out some tweets containing homophobic and abusive language, sponsors and supporters. After that, understandably, pulled out 10 seconds ago.
Yeah, this was doomed from the start. You can tell it's something that sounded interesting on paper, but nobody actually thought through the actual logistics of it.
I think that's exactly it, Romney. This thing sounded good on paper when you haven't had to test it.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is that we have a precedent for such a thing like this happening. To kind of give an example, a lot of people, I'm sure all of us have heard of the group Anonymous, where they're basically the group of hacktivists. But what a lot of people may not realize is that, well, there is division within Anonymous. Some who believe that the group should do the hacking for the lulz, and others who believe they should be more politically active. But then you have fractures even there, depending on which side you fall on the ideological spectrum within Anonymous.
Well, there are factions within Anonymous, aren't they? Like they actually they refer to themselves differently within the group.
And again, that depends, because the thing is that with Anonymous, there is no leader. It is a leaderless organization, and that's kind of the problem you have here with the bully hunters, is that they were basically trying to start this movement, but didn't have any clear rules or guidelines for the bully hunters to follow, and thus it basically opened the floodgates for, well, rampant abuse of power. Now, if this was, to kind of look at it in a gaming context, say you have a guild in an MMORPG, and each guild has a set rule set that you're expected to follow and abide by as part of being part of this guild. This is basically trying to be a guild with no rules that anyone can join at any time for whatever reason, and that kind of defeats the whole purpose of forming a guild in the first place.
Pretty much. Although some MMOs are actually just saying, create various groups. Which doesn't help either. The other thing, too, that we should also point out is that the targeted demographic for this was girl gamers. So specifically, and I have a feeling that it like for the people who called in, they were specifically looking for girl gamers who are getting harassed. Now, before people jump down my throat, yes, I acknowledge some girl gamers get harassed. Some girl gamers are like Zombie Unicorn, and they just kind of they kind of dish it out. Or in some cases, like most of the people that I run with in my WoW guild, they're sarcastic women. All right. They'll play with you on that regard. Okay. But there are ones that get abused. But that also brings up another interesting question, and therefore another hole I'd like to poke into. What happens if, say, Alex, who is being tormented online because he decided for the heck of it, Alex, you picked up Phantasy Star Online too, and you start getting harassed? Would a bully hunter come to your aid? You are, after all, a man.
Yeah, I'm a man. So I doubt they would come to my aid if I needed them.
So what you're basically saying is that men don't get bullied online?
Of course not. Only women's do.
See, there's another poke. There's another hole in the argument, is because everybody gets abused online. Okay. Mm-hmm. It's just in some cases, like with us, where you kind of just develop a thicker skin to it, and you don't let it bother you. Like, you know, I'm pretty sure, I mean, if I'm not speaking right for you guys, then let me know. Like, we all had that moment where we gave in, like, and we got pissed off. Mine came a couple of years ago when my wife got involved. I'm pretty sure we've all had that moment. So we've all had that open wound. but we've been doing this so long that the open wound has since scarred. And so at that point, you literally do approach this with a thicker skin.
Yeah. Yeah. It is kind of ridiculous, but the double standard is real. And it's not even just in gaming. It's just in life in general. Speaking from someone who was tormented by a lot of girls in my adolescent years, and the fact that no one came to my defense because I was a guy, and apparently guys like that kind of attention, it's bullshit, plain and simple. And so the double standard is real. And that punches yet another hole in the concept of bully hunters, because then it raises the question, is it addressing a problem that is actually there to begin with? Now, yes, women do get harassed and more or less forced off of a lot of gaming communities. That is a fact of life.
Sure.
But it's a case of, hey, if you're going to actually be bully hunters, you actually need, more defining criteria of what constitutes a bully and justifies them to be hunted.
And that's the problem, is that by the definition, like for as much as I want to acknowledge that bullying and cyberbullying and all of that exists, okay, it is a thing. Trolls do exist, and you're not supposed to feed them. Trolls do exist, but the bottom line is that the definition that people have set for it is incredibly broad. And so at that point, another thing that could possibly happen is, okay, right now the demographic is that women are the ones that are being harassed. What happens when we do a year later survey and the demographic changes? Okay, so now you have to service this one, but not everybody else. That's the issue, is like I think in order to be able to make this work, you'd have to narrow the definition, but narrowing the definition isn't going to help the situation. Unfortunately, the bottom line is that as much as, and I've already said this to a couple of people, what this does is nothing more than perpetuates a cycle. And the reason I say that is because you're tormented and bullied. You call a bully hunter. That bully hunter bullies the bully. The bully is now a victim. They call a bully hunter, et cetera, et cetera. And you keep on going, around and around and around. And the purpose is not to keep this cycle rolling. It is to break out of it.
Yeah. And another thing,
that's not what this thing does.
Yeah, and that goes into another thing I want to bring up, which is yet another hole into this Polish submarine of an idea.
Keep on going.
Yes, and so this also raises the question, what if someone is falsely accused of being a bully? What if it's someone who reacts to something that may be perceived as bullying, but doesn't actually constitute as bullying when, say, what if it was someone...
Romney, that's not poking a hole. That's putting the window down on the ground and letting a tractor run over it.
Yes, like I said, this thing is already a Polish submarine of an idea, so it's going to sink regardless.
Yeah.
But the idea here is that what if someone decides to call a bully hunter, not because they were being bullied, but because they're getting a little frustrated that someone is beating them at the game, which we have all seen that happen, whether we have siblings or not, we see that sort of thing happen. What is the appeals process? What means does someone who is accused of being a bully have to defend themselves, to actually defend against the claims against being a bully? Because again, we operate in the United States at the very least. I can't speak for the rest of the world, but here in the US, our legal system operates under the presumption of innocence. And the problem with something like bully hunters is that it operates on the Roman system, which puts burden of proof on the accused rather than the accuser. So what is the appeals process? How can someone contest this to point out, hey, this wasn't actually bullying? What means does someone have to defend themselves?
And you really can't, because the bully hunters are judge, jury, and executioner all in one. So
basically, what Alex is saying is that basically this is the YouTube system where you're judged guilty. It doesn't matter that you don't have the innocent until proven guilty. You're guilty until proven innocent, and you have no recourse. In fact, I'm going to answer that question. I don't think there was an appeal process. I think, in all honesty, you get contracted, you get bully hunted, and there's no recourse that you have.
Yeah. And then that also leads to yet another hole in this. I'll stop with the Polish submarine jokes because I doubt people in the chat actually get it. But the joke of this is that they make this screen doors anyway. Basically, the other problem here is, what do they expect the long-term effects are going to be? Because, someone keeps getting killed by the same player in a game. The game ends. They play another game and move on. What are you going to have this bully hunter stalk this player online? How are you going to do that? How are you going to guarantee that you're going to be in the same server, that you're going to be in the same match, that you're going to even be following them in the same game? Because for all we know, they may play COD for a while, but then they decide, I'm going to go over to Overwatch for a while, or I'm going to go over to Team Fortress 2 for a while, or I'm going to go play some Street Fighter for a while.
The presumption is that the way the system was supposed to work is that you call in for a bully hunter, they friend you, and then you invite them into the game. But that also brings another hole into the argument. What if you're in a popular game like Overwatch? I don't know if you guys know this, but those matches get full pretty damn quick. So what happens if you go into a full room and your bully hunter friend didn't get brought in with you, but you still have the harasser? Well, congratulations. Because I'm guessing that you had to pay for this to some extent, because they do say that all the proceeds to it will go to charity. Yeah, fat lot of good that did. But yeah, you had to pay for this. And so at that point, if you had a full room, you had a full room. How does that solve anything? Here's another thing that people didn't necessarily consider. What if the bully calls a bully hunter first? And then you just have bully hunter versus bully hunter. Again, I want to make the Teddy Roosevelt joke. Bully!
And looking at this is just like, it's like an escalating gang war, basically, where one person calls one of their homies, the other guy calls a couple of his homies, and then the other homies call more of their homies, and soon you basically have homies on both sides.
Pretty much. Like, I don't know. Like, when I saw some of the coverage of this thing, was I the only one that thought of the scene in Batman Begins? Is like, so you bring we bring guns, they get Kevlar. We got armor piercing rounds. You know, like the cycle just perpetuates itself. Again, you're going around and around and around and around, and the goal is to get out of the cycle. And unfortunately, all this does is basically put it on turbo. It's like a turbine just constantly running.
Yeah, I mean, I swear, it's like something that a businessman would come up with if they were trying to like make bully hunting a business that they would profit off of such a cycle. Like, this is like arms dealer level stuff that we have here.
Yep. And here's another hole in the argument. We all do something online. Are you saying that we don't have friends who can fulfill this role without having to pay for a bully hunter? I play WoW, and I can honestly tell you that I'm in a guild with about 20 or 30 people that know more and can play better than me. Why would I pay for a service when I could easily talk to them? I've got them friended already, and they could come in and own some dude in a battleground for me. It's almost like supportive communities are probably the way to handle this. Not in the escalation concept, but giving you an outlet. But that's what I'm saying, guys. Is like, are you telling me that, I mean, Alex, you don't play Overwatch, but I'm guaranteeing that you have a friend or two that does. So if you came in and you were sucking for your first time around because you haven't played it before, you're getting harassed, all you'd have to do is call your 2 or 3 friends who are awesome at playing Widowmaker, and you win. Why pay for it?
Yeah.
Why pay for the process? So we've poked plenty of holes into this argument, but thankfully we didn't have to poke holes in it for too long because, like I said, in a 24 to 48 hour time frame, this was gone. And so at that point, and here's the thing, guys, I'm not saying that I think people who are trying to create this did it with the best of intentions in mind. The issue was it wasn't tested. It wasn't questioned. It wasn't like me and Romney said, and I think Alex would agree, this looked good on paper. But in actual practice, it wasn't going to work. And it wasn't going to solve the problem.
Yeah, it's as has been said many times before, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
And candy. Somebody threw that at me one time. I've always wanted to use it.
Yeah, and just looking at this, I mean, I can see this idea working maybe on a smaller scale, maybe not as like a live stream that people can watch or like some service. I can see this maybe as being some sort of like a reality show or something. But again, you then run into the To Catch a Predator scenario of vetting the process, making sure that the person bullying is actually bullying and that you're not basically going after them for no good reason. Again, I used To Catch a Predator as an example because for those of you who don't know, that was the NBC journalistic show hosted by Chris Hansen, where they targeted, well, people who were basically soliciting sex from underage minors. But what a lot of people won't tell you is that a lot of those arrests were basically the defense attorneys were able to argue, hey, that's entrapment. And the reason we don't see the show anymore is because, well, during the last showing, the person that they were arresting led police on a high-speed chase and then shot himself in a barn. And thus it was argued by defense attorneys saying, hey, this is entrapment. This goes against the law. It doesn't allow for due process to work, so you got to shut it down. Pretty much.
So moving on into the next story that we have, this one's more positive, I promise, guys. In fact, this broke while we were doing our podcast, and you know, Romney let us know, but holy crap, guys, you let us know. I got so many people. I really wish I kept the list of people who had sent us the same article that Romney caught, because I'm thankful for all of you. And the main reason being is the announcement we have is that Shenmue 1 and 2, it is officially confirmed, will be re-released on PS4, Xbox One, and PC. So people might remember a couple of years back when Shenmue 3 got announced, I was excited because I'm the Shenmue fan here, but I had a question. And that was, were you going to remaster the first two games? Because here's the thing, a lot of modern day gamers would not have played Shenmue 1 and 2. So when they walked into Shenmue 3, they'd have no idea what was going on. So with that being said, I reached out to the creator of Shenmue and never heard back. Like to this day, I even double checked my tweets and no, never heard back from the guy. And that's fine. But I now have officially my answer. So Shenmue 1 and 2 are going to be re-released, not remastered, mind you. Now, some people got that wrong. It is not being remastered. And in fact, if you look at the trailer, it is the exact same gameplay from the original games. Okay. What they're basically going to do is do a digital release of Shenmue 1 and 2. I'm guessing they'll be separate because everything that I'm reading says that they will be. I've seen a few people say, well, are they going to be merged? I don't think so, because they're both pretty big games. So at that point, Shenmue 1, Shenmue 2 will be re-released for PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC, I'm guessing via Steam. And you will be able to play them either in the original Japanese dialogue, or you can go to what a lot of people call the crappy English voiceovers. I'm not saying you're wrong, people, but I like them. They're endearing in a weird way. So yeah, this is definitely happening, and you're going to be getting also a choice between modern and classic controls for Shenmue. They're going to redo the control scheme to make it fit to the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One controllers, or you can do classic controls the way that it controlled on the original Dreamcast. And from what I understand, these are going to be the Dreamcast versions of those games. So for those kind of hoping, and I think there's a few of you that wanted Shenmue 2 to be the Xbox version, which I think fixed a few issues within it. No, these are going to be the original Dreamcast games re-released on modern day consoles. Also, people did ask this question. Switch. Why no Switch? I don't know what else to tell you guys. I don't think Shenmue 3 would have an issue being on Switch, but right now the battle plan is it's on these consoles. And so that's why I think Shenmue 1 and 2 are being released to these consoles. I'm not saying that a Switch release isn't possible. It'd be really hard on the hard drive for the Switch. In fact, I don't even think it's possible.
Yeah. Plus, looking at this, just looking at the way it is, it's a lot easier to develop and port games to the consoles like the PC, Xbox, and PS4 currently. Whereas the Switch, you have a proprietary OS you have to design for with a proprietary control system. If they do bring it to the Switch, they have to it's kind of like what they did with Okami, where they rebuilt it, set it in HD, and had these max resolutions, and then downgraded for consoles like the PS3. So they're going to create these new versions that run on these new consoles, and then down the road, they'll probably downgrade it to the point where it can run on the Switch effectively.
Mm-hmm. Now, one other thing I also want to address, and Alex can kind of help me with this too, is the fact that why aren't we getting remasterings? Why aren't we getting we're scaling these things up, but we're not redoing the models or anything like that? The answer is pretty simple. We don't have the money, guys. The money is going towards Shenmue 3. So at that point, this is basically, and in fact, one of the things I think that this is being done for is, and I hope it's wrong, maybe the Shenmue 3 project is running out of money. And so at that point, they're releasing Shenmue 1 and 2 and putting the proceeds towards Shenmue 3's production. Yeah, now, I don't think that's possible. It could be.
Well, yeah, and the other purpose of it could also be to gauge whether there is enough demand for a Shenmue 3, because this would be the best way to see if even making Shenmue 3 would be profitable, would be, okay, are enough people buying this re-release of the first 2 games? And then by seeing how successful that is, they can see, okay, there either is an audience that would buy Shenmue 3, or if it doesn't get enough people buying, it's like, okay, it's clear that this is a niche franchise. We may make it, but it's clearly gonna not be a priority.
Well, Shenmue 3 probably better happen. I mean, it got the Kickstarter back. I know that's not a guarantee, but there will be a lot of pissed off backers. So if Shenmue 3, I can't imagine this being used as a metric to gauge interest for Shenmue 3. I could see this being as a method to gauge interest as a possible HD remaster down the road of Shenmue's 1 and 2, which is why they're just going the standard definition route. Shenmue's always been more of a cult following than a huge hit anyway.
And that actually kind of goes into the other speculation, what Alex was actually talking about, is the other thing too, is people might remember that when Shenmue 3 got funded, I can't remember his first name, but Suzuki, the creator, actually came out. Yu Suzuki, thank you. He came out and said he would like to make more than just Shenmue 3. He would like to make, in fact, I think the original idea was he wanted to do Shenmue 4 and Shenmue 5 to wrap up the saga in his mind. And so another thing that this could be used is to gauge actual audience results to see whether or not they could go past Shenmue 3. To see whether or not a Shenmue 4 would even be worth it. Because remember, guys, Shenmue 3, Sony wasn't even willing to back it until the Kickstarter funded successfully. Okay, which is, yes, it's kind of dirty and all that. I'm not necessarily disagreeing with people, but it does kind of explain their point of view. They didn't know if there was enough people wanting it, if the cult was big enough to support Shenmue 3. Thankfully, it was. But this might also be a way for them to gauge whether or not Sony should go full bore into funding Shenmue 4. Because the bottom line is, I honestly think that given some of the people's viewpoints on Shenmue 3's Kickstarter, I don't think you get a Shenmue 4 Kickstarter. A lot of people are going to look you in the eye and go, why are you doing this? So at that point, Sony has to have the justification. And in some cases, Microsoft has to have the justification on whether or not to bring this over solely to their area.
Well, yeah, and the other thing to consider is, given Sega's situation regarding some of their other IP, it's also a case of Sega has to know that this is going to put them in the black. Because again, as we've seen with some of their more popular IP like Sonic, it's kind of a case of, okay, we want to make sure we're putting out an idea that of ours that is actually going to work. I mean, no random rebranding where we're rebranding Shenmue and we give them a neck scarf or something.
Yeah, exactly. So I think in all honesty, it's great that they're doing this, but obviously there are game developer ulterior motives to it. And I completely understand that, but I don't care because I'm getting 2 of my favorite games re-released so that I can enjoy them again. Now, the final question that I want to get into, and I'm going to disappoint some people. I got a lot of people asking, will you do a Let's Play of it? I don't think you can, in all honesty. The problem is that I love Shenmue, but one of the downsides of Shenmue is that it is based in modern day. And so a lot of the things that you can do throughout it are modern day things. You can go to the arcade and play other games. You can go to various restaurants and try the food and all that. And as much as I understand that people might want a Let's Play of it, I don't think it's that great a Let's Play.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason that when they did Shenmue the movie, they just basically decided to only focus on, the fights and had the fights done by players who had the timing down packed.
And for those who bring up the concept of like, well, Alex has never played the games, I think it would actually be really hard to keep Alex's attention. doing a Let's Play of Shenmue. And the main reason being is that with games like the stuff that we play on Dragon's Shadow, it's not based in modern day, which means he can actually, he can flex his imagination. He can have some fun with the whole process. Shenmue is, for the most part, a slice of life anime with all the boring stuff put in. And by that, I mean, like, before Alex jumps down my throat, if they go to say McDonald's or whatever they're calling it in that particular anime, you're not waiting with them to get the food.
Right.
Okay. You move right to the food moment.
Right.
In Shenmue, you're doing all of that. And so at that point, it's like, that's a harder thing to keep people entertained. I mean, I could talk to everybody and you could hear the craptastic audio or the craptastic dub that they had, but it's a harder sell to do a Let's Play of that.
My brain is just now suddenly imagining a game based on K-On! That plays like Shenmue. So it wouldn't even have the fight scenes. It would basically replace all the fight scenes with rhythm game sequences.
Pretty much, yeah. Pretty much.
There's at least 1 or 2 K-On! Rhythm games out there. So
well, yeah,
no, but I'm saying like this is K-On!, but it goes above and beyond. So like you aren't just like, so they go to the tea house or they go to the classroom and they have their tea and you get to see them sip their tea.
One sip at a time.
That's what you'd be walking into with Shenmue. Okay, I love Shenmue. I'm not saying that it isn't flawed. That's why I will enjoy Shenmue 3 when it eventually comes out, because it's going to be just as dumb, but the story is compelling. And at the bottom, at the end of the day, I mean, the bottom line of it is it's a murder mystery. Okay, it's a murder mystery with some fantasy elements thrown in to try and explain it. And so at that point, unfortunately, you're not doing the murder mystery all the time. I mean, there's actually a point where you have to find people who are Chinese in Japan. Yes. That's one of the objectives in Shenmue. Because you don't know the kanji that was on the murderer's back. So you need to find people who are actually Chinese, which means you have to ask everybody if they're Chinese. Riveting gameplay. So at that point, yeah, final thoughts on this one before we move on. I'm excited. I'm definitely excited. I'm glad that we're getting it, but this may just be one of those things I share on my own.
Yeah. Happy for Shenmue fans. Not really interested in it myself.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been curious about it, so if it's for a reasonable price, I may check it out.
Yeah. I'm hoping that it's also for a reasonable price too, because like, I like the idea of a remaster, but if it's $20, even I'm going to complain.
Well, even I'm going to complain. Like $20, that would be pretty freaking good for 2 games.
That would be, in my opinion, $20 would be highway robbery for it. I think $5 is justifiable, and more than likely to justify it, it's probably going to be like $9.99.
Yeah,
and I'm not going to be happy about that, but I'm a Shenmue fan. I'm going to get it.
Well, yeah, like, yeah, and just in my opinion, even $20 at least would seem like what I'd be more willing to pay $20 as opposed to, say, 40 or 50.
Yeah. So moving on into the next story that we have, this is actually an update from the old story that we covered earlier this year of the Wichita swatter. So people might remember that in Wichita, a swatting occurred where they actually hit the wrong house, and unfortunately, a man was murdered in the process. They have since found the suspect who called it in, part of an organization called named Tyler Barris, and have since put him in jail. So he's actually, I can't remember what actual jail he's in, but he has been in jail. I think he's awaiting trial right now for the swatting incident that actually occurred. But
yeah, he's currently in the Sedgwick County Jail.
And he unfortunately, through a loophole in the online stuff that they actually had at Sedgwick County, he decided to make his presence once again known on Twitter, and in fact threatened to SWAT people while he was in jail. So so he actually accessed one of his old Twitter accounts, and this is some of the stuff that he actually sent out. How am I on the internet if I'm in jail? Oh, because I'm an EGOD. That's how. And then he also said, all right, now, who was talking shit? Your ass is about to get swatted. So he was basically threatening to swat people while in jail.
Yeah, and
I think it's clear to say he has not learned a damn thing.
Yeah, and looking at what happened, the Sedgwick County Sheriff's Office issued a statement stating that what happened, to give context, they have these computer kiosks that prisoners are allowed to use that allow them to use the internet in very, very limited capacities. So say if they were taking college courses, or if they were doing like it's usually what it's for is if they're taking certain courses or doing specific controlled things on the internet. And apparently the software vendor that maintained the kiosk didn't do the upgrade properly at the Sedgwick County Jail, which allowed Mr. Barris to access Twitter and post those tweets, which he should not have been able to do under normal circumstances. And so that is what allowed him to post those tweets. And according to the Sheriff County office, the kiosk was accessible to 14 inmates for less than a few hours before the vendor became aware of the issue. And now, as soon as it was identified, the vendor came out, fixed it, and so they were able to put the security features in to prevent it from happening again. So that's basically what happened here, is that the vendor realized, oh crap, we didn't upgrade this properly. Let's fix it.
Yeah. Now, the article that we have from the New York Post, by the way, doesn't exactly say if the Sedgwick County Prison actually instigated so this was technically like a reoffense, roughly. So we don't know if they're incurring additional penalties to him while he's there. I don't think we ever will know. The correction system, it's kind of hard to get those kinds of answers. I have a feeling he was penalized to some extent, but yeah, it is a reoffense that'll probably get brought up in his trial, which, according to later in the story that we're following, he has gone to trial at this point, but he has just not entered a plea yet. So it sounds to me like they've done their what is the first?
The arraignment.
They've done the arraignment, but a plea hasn't necessarily been put in yet.
Well, so actually, it looks here that arraignment. Yeah, he hasn't even been arraigned yet. It looks like he was supposed to be on April 5th, but then it got postponed to May 22nd.
Gotcha. Okay. So at that point, they've had some kind of a hearing, but he has not been properly arraigned at this point. And yeah, so I have a feeling this is probably going to get brought up at that May 22nd arraignment to either add charges or to address it via the judge. I'm not 100% certain of that, but I think that's usually how those processes go, is that yes, he incurs a penalty while he's in jail, but they also add a charge onto this. So he basically reoffended.
Yeah, it's hard
as they are concerned.
It's hard to say for certain. Most that I can see happening in this case is that what would probably happen is that he will probably have certain privileges revoked. So in the case of doing this reoffense, he probably is going to lose his internet privileges until the time of the hearing.
Pretty much. So, Alex, your take on this situation? Well, I mean, I think all of us are going to have the take that he's a dumbass. But
yeah,
that's me.
I guess because he hasn't officially been arraigned yet, that's why he's not being withheld for on any kind of computer usage. Because I would almost. Granted, this was an exploit he found, but I'd almost think for the charges he's incurring, they would have pretty much prohibited him from using any computer.
Yeah, I kind of have a feeling to that extent too. And my guess is that he picked the right time where somebody wasn't watching him. So maybe the best way to explain it is maybe a fight broke out and the other guards were handling that fight and he just went over to the kiosk.
Yeah, possibly.
So, because I have a feeling given the nature of what he is being charged for, I don't see him being able to access that kiosk. I tend to agree on that one, but obviously it's very clear he didn't learn a damn thing because he's already threatening to swat people while he's in jail. So at that point, yeah, I kind of hope he gets the book thrown at him in this regard. Final thoughts on this one. There really isn't too much to go over, but aside from this guy thought he would try to reestablish his reputation and, well, see how well that worked out for him.
Yeah, the only thing he's reestablished is just how much of an idiot he is.
Pretty much. All right, moving on into the Nintendo talk that we have for this evening. This is actually really cool, and a few of you guys actually reached out and asked us to talk about it. In particular, Nintendo's filing patents again.
Oh boy.
No, Alex, it's not for a space shuttle.
Oh.
It might be for a space shuttle.
It might be. I mean, it could be the navigation system for a space shuttle.
It could be, yeah. It could be the way to pilot it. So, but we don't know that for certain. So before you get your hopes up, Alex, yes, Nintendo has filed a patent. I'm not sure. I think it's called plurality of information processing apparatuses. But it basically is a patent to allow for communication displays, or rather touchscreens, to communicate, to be able to interact with one another. And the example that actually gets shown, and for our live chat, I'll actually show this and probably even put this in our RSS feed too, is this is the example of the patent at work. So you kind of see this this Nintendo patent, and here's what we're presuming are two Switch screens, roughly, is what's being shown to us, that you would be able to do a puzzle that would start up on one screen and then integrate into the next screen. And here's another example of that, is like here would be your avatar, and you would be able to advance in the level by linking the displays together and moving forward. And then here's a much, much more complicated one. But this one, I wouldn't necessarily say they're Switch screens. They look smaller than that. But basically, Nintendo is filing a patent to allow for touchscreens to interact with one another. Now, this has already sparked a lot of people's interest into the concept that Nintendo has already kind of said there is a Switch successor in the works. And whether or not this will be integrated into that, or will we actually see this patent implemented on the Switch itself? That's a harder thing to prove. It's possible, but I don't think it's likely.
And looking at this, I look at this and just kind of seeing the way it's designed, I'm just looking at this and I'm just like, doesn't this product already kind of exist? Because I know there was a gaming system that came out a few years ago where you were able to do the same thing, but instead of touch screens, they were basically these cubes that you would connect together that would basically do that same exact thing. So it's not even necessarily something that's entirely new either. No. I mean, maybe the gimmick Nintendo's hoping to aim for is that this is done via a touch screen.
Technically, you could make the argument that this kind of technology has been here since the 90s. I mean, for crying out loud, like some of the old Digimon Tamagotchi things were able to link together so that you could fight. So at that point, that, I mean, to me, that is two displays communicating with each other to be able to put both of your monsters on the screen.
Yeah, I remember this was even the premise of a DS game a while back, where you still had only the top and bottom screen, but the idea is that when you had your character in one part, you could shift the bottom to basically shift the dungeon. I think it was actually a Mistwalker project that did that.
Yeah, so already we're seeing examples of people actually utilizing this. I think now here's the thing. I think these things do exist. I think Nintendo's trying to implement this to be their own technology and maybe implement it for a broader means, actually allowing for specific games to integrate this into their framing. I couldn't begin to tell you how. I mean, like some people have actually reached out to me and gone, is this going to be in conjunction with things like Labo? I don't see how it is, because again, this is a technology we don't know if it exists in the Switch. If it does, it'd be news to us. And guys, we read all of the patents that came across when it was still the NX, and I don't remember this being a part of it. So I'm not saying that it's not possible, but I don't know the Switch doing this.
Well, I mean, you could, maybe not to the sophisticated degree Nintendo is hoping for.
Yeah.
But it's something you could do in the Switch in maybe a smaller scale, depending on how you have multiple Switch systems communicating with one another, whether it's through Wi-Fi or through Bluetooth or even through the NFC reader that's built into the Switch.
Yeah, I mean, we know that the Switches can link together via Wi-Fi. We're just like the only thing that we're not sure on is like the screens actually linking together, especially in the ways that we showed you to help you finish a level. That would actually be a really cool and inventive game that I think we would all be like freaking out about, but we never saw anything to that extent.
Yeah. Plus the other problem of doing that sort of thing with the Switch specifically, that would require multiple players that each have their own Switch, which isn't particularly likely given the console's price point. Whereas something like this, if they wanted to do it as a new console, you would have to sell it as a unit that comes with at least 3 screens. So that way you don't have people breaking the bank to buy just one, because that would kill it super quickly.
And the other thing that people do bring up with this is that, again, when I showed one of the images, like it looks like Switch screens, right? But then I showed the one that had 4 screens in there, and it looked like the screens were smaller. So at that point, I know of a few people that are actually, going into the rumor mill here and saying, okay, could this actually be not necessarily for a Switch successor, but also for a 3DS successor? Now, remember, guys, we were told the Switch was supposed to be a successor to the Wii U as well as the 3DS. But we all kind of agreed years ago it didn't necessarily limit Nintendo from doing another handheld. It just didn't seem likely that they were going to do it, since the 3DS isn't really contested. But this kind of sheds light into the concept that, yeah, maybe they do have a 3DS successor. And maybe that's where this technology is going, is because they want to integrate all of this stuff for, more broader gameplay for those who play handheld. It's possible.
Yeah, for all I know, it could be something new entirely that may not necessarily be meant to replace any consoles. It could just be, hey, here's a new gimmick thing we're coming out with.
So with that being said, let's actually go into our thoughts on the matter. Like, what do we think? Is this a good idea or a bad idea? And then also, like, what games do we actually see being implemented into this? I'll be honest in this regard. When it's new technology, I like the fact that Nintendo tries it in a unique format. They don't try it in their existing IPs. They make sure that they have an experimental format. So, for example, we had Wii Sports that was supposed to get people used to motion controls. For the Switch, you had 1-2 Switch. Granted, it wasn't as successful, and a lot of people have argued that it should have been just packaged with the Switch. But that was the way to be able to show off what the Switch could do just with casual gaming. And that's kind of what I would like to see happen here, is that we see this implementation with a non-brand game to show us how it works, and then eventually you integrate it into first-party brands. So you could technically see like a Mario game trying to utilize this stuff. Alex, what are you thinking on this one? Is this a good idea or a bad idea, and how do you want to see it implemented?
Oh, I don't know quite yet what it's going to do or where it's going to go, but I could see this being something useful for Pokemon, especially for trading. Just rather
that's
than
actually that's one I think that would work perfect for this,
especially for local trades. Rather than having to fuss with IR, with linking up IR systems through your infrared little visors. Just a simple link up and swipe and a tap. And yeah, there you go. I think that could be really interesting there.
And here's the thing too, is like, now a lot of the patent here is talking that they would be talking via Wi-Fi. So that doesn't necessarily solve your problem. But if you look at this, the screens are interconnected. So at that point, it almost makes you wonder if, there has to be at least some kind of a porting or some kind of a connecting that happens there that is more of a physical connection rather than a Wi-Fi. And so at that point, you're exactly right. That could make, trading and everything like that so much easier in the process that it might be worthwhile for people to check out. So Pokemon's one example that you had. Did you have another one?
No, just Pokemon.
I would actually, this is one that I don't know how well it would work, but I almost would want to see like a Sonic or a Mario game just to see how a platformer would work in interconnected screens.
Well, honestly, I think a better one that would work would probably be a Legend of Zelda title, like specifically a top-down one where maybe the whole gimmick is that you have to piece together the dungeons by shifting the screens to different parts to basically... It kind of would work similarly to stuff like Phantom Hourglass, where you have like the island that you have to explore that doesn't have a map that you have to draw yourself, just on a similar scale. Just have it be like an 8-bit Link. You have the room with enemies and stuff in one, and then you link the screen to another one after basically triggering the puzzle that lets you go to the next room, and then you basically shift the screens around to make the shape of the dungeon.
Exactly. Actually, another one that just barely came to me was since Alex brought up Pokemon, I almost wonder, given what you actually explained, Romney, would this be a great way to reintroduce the Mystery Dungeon series?
Well, to be fair, the Mystery Dungeon series is still doing fairly well. It's just most people think of the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon series, but it's also had its own fair share of genres. that I don't really see this working for a roguelike, given that you have to be a kind of hardcore player to enjoy a roguelike sort of experience. So
Yeah.
I don't really see like
that's
maybe
actually another brand I don't think would work. I can already see people screaming, "Oh, what about Metroid?" I don't know if I want to see Metroid with this yet.
Like Metroid, you could kind of make work, but maybe not as like a full-on experience. But maybe it's like a mini game that's Metroid themed. So maybe it's like, oh, you have to like assemble the pieces of the map using the screens. I mean, the way I would see it is that it would work kind of like a rail shooter where you have Samus going in shooting, and you just have to keep shifting the screens to keep the action going for as long as possible.
See, and the only thing that I can see out of the matter is basically using the displays as an extender, and that's like the most basic way that I could see that happening is like you can now see more into this big room instead of having the one display and not knowing what you're walking into. It also might be an interesting way for platformers to hide Easter eggs, like, you know, some people have always kind of speculated, you know, what is in that pit in a Mario game? Well, you can extend the displays and you can find out.
Yeah, or maybe even go kind of the Paper Mario route where you play around with the perspective a little bit, where you start in 2D, and maybe if you shift the screen so that you make a 3D display, you then switch it around and basically see, okay, well, what's behind this block that we couldn't see in 2D? I mean, another thing I could kind of see, although this one would be harder to implement, is maybe trying to implement kind of creating a Fire Emblem mini game based on this sort of thing, where maybe you have to kind of use the screens to arrange where you have certain units. But that one would be a bit harder to implement. I can see it as kind of more of a competitive thing where you have one player with one screen, another player with another screen, and then you have a screen in the middle that kind of shows the terrain.
Yeah. But the bottom line is, I mean, given the diagrams that we have, there's a lot of potential for this project, but we don't know like how this is going to be implemented. We can only guess that it's going to be next gen. I could see like a patch or something like that integrating this into the Switch, but I think it's more likely to say this is next gen. This is what Nintendo's working on as a successor to the Switch instead of or a successor to the 3DS, as opposed to bringing it into existing hardware. Because the only problem that I see with that is it would be on the newer versions and the older versions wouldn't work, or they'd have weirder connectivity. So already, final thoughts on this one before we move on into the next story, because that's pretty much the patent in a nutshell.
No, it's too early to tell what the plan is, so we'll just have to wait and see if maybe this is the path to the space shuttle.
So what I'm saying is, Alex, is that this could technically be a way to the space shuttle. It just isn't the space shuttle yet.
I'll get that space shuttle someday.
You probably will. And then you will wait for my reaction, and it will satisfy you.
He will wait for your reaction while he's on the surface of Mars.
Pretty much. But then again, I will probably be there with him, so it won't matter. So moving on into, so that's the last one of our tech portion. Moving on into the entertainment portion, we unfortunately have to revisit some old news because, well, we have some additional news in the Channel Awesome situation. And frankly, as far as I'm concerned, it is the final nail in the whole story. It is the final nail in the coffin for Channel Awesome, as we have been able to now confirm. It was rumored when we found out about it, but we've now confirmed that Doug Walker, aka the Nostalgia Critic, and Rob Walker, who is he's Doug Walker's brother, but he's also like the writer. He's the guy who's handling the camera, things like that. They have both left together Channel Awesome. And it looks like, first of all, they're kind of shutting down specific social media. So Doug has actually shut down his LinkedIn, and Rob has shut down his Facebook page. And there has been rumor and scuttlebutt that they have sought out a lawyer to do a legal battle to regain the Nostalgia Critic IP from Mike Machad and Channel Awesome. But it is official. The Nostalgia Critic himself has left Channel Awesome. Is there any, so this is the one thing that is a little confusing. Some people have been asking, is there anybody left? Now, here's where it gets a little confusing. Technically, Brad Jones is still listed on the site. Now, some people have actually said via a convention or via one of his videos, he has quit Channel Awesome, but they still have him on the Channel Awesome page. And then also Guru Larry is still there, and he is basically making a big joke of this at this point, is that he survived the Channel Awesome Hunger Games. But that's it. nobody else is on Channel Awesome aside from the archive shows that you can get. And that pretty much looks like it's the nail in the coffin for Channel Awesome. I don't see where they can go from here. There's also been a lot of speculation as to, okay, even if Doug and Rob were to get the Nostalgia Critic IP back from Mike Bashad, and more likely what they'd have to do that is pay him off, would there even be a reason to bring the Nostalgia Critic back? Because of all the bad publicity that Change the Channel has done, would anybody accept the Nostalgia Critic if he were to return? And that is definitely something that both Doug and Rob have to consider at this point. So let's just go around the table here. Alex, your thoughts on the fact that Doug Walker has left his own channel?
Yeah, truly the end of an era, truly the end of a legacy right here.
Did they officially make it to 10 years?
Yeah, they've been on 10 years. So originally they were branded as that guy with the glasses.com, of course, but officially,
but everybody considers the era to be Tigwatig going into Channel Awesome. So yeah, they've been around for a decade.
Yeah. So it's incredible. And after 10 years, it's over just like that. In the blink of an eye, pretty much.
Do you think there's any validity to some people actually saying that if Doug and Rob were to get the Nostalgia Critic rights, and they were going to relaunch the Nostalgia Critic, but it was a one-man show again, that they would be successful? Or do you think that it would be pointless?
That's hard to say. I mean, time certainly does heal wounds. I feel like potentially they could find a new audience again and find their voice again. I think what they'd have to do would be to pretty much fall quiet for quite a while. I don't know how long precisely, but probably just want to fall quiet for quite a bit and just kind of slowly reemerge again as just kind of maybe get back to their roots a little bit when Doug was doing things like 5-second movies and bum reviews and that before the whole Nostalgia Critic became a brand.
Yeah, so at that point, how long do you think? Just 10? I hate to say this, but like 10 years?
I mean, that's a huge gap. I don't even say 10 years. I'd say a couple of years, probably. I mean,
most things die down.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it, we consume media so rapidly these days. I think people will forget in a couple of years' time. This thing is eventually going to probably blow over as people start moving on to more things. Right now, it's a hot topic right now because so many people are talking about it and because the Change the Channel hashtag blew up over the last month. Right?
And because Guru Larry won't let you forget it because he wants to be the survivor of the Channel Awesome Hunger Games. Apparently people are actually petitioning to ban Guru Larry from Twitter because he won't shut up about it. I don't even know. I don't follow the guy. So does he do this?
I don't know. I'm not even sure I follow his Twitter. I follow his channel, but I don't know if he's blasting social media right now with Change the Channel.
I mean, the only extent that I've ever known Guru Larry was when he was with Screw Attack, and then he eventually went over to the then Blistered Thumbs. And he used to blast Screw Attack all the time, and then eventually he stopped that, and now he's going here. So I don't know what's happening there. But Romney, your thoughts on Doug leaving Channel Awesome, as well as kind of the same question that I asked Alex, is do you think that there's validity to Doug coming back as the Nostalgia Critic at some point and restarting the brand?
Well, I was looking to see if there was actually any hard confirmation that he has officially left the channel. So far, the closest thing is that they've shut down the store, the forums, and a lot of the other sites. But so at this point, it is still technically rumor. At this point, unless he... I can see maybe Doug Walker trying to bounce back under some newer ideas, but even then, it's very much a case he'd have to tread lightly. Like, the first thing he would need to do is that he and Rob would have to own up to the mistakes made by Channel Awesome, because even if they do separate, and even if they do get the rights from Mishad to keep doing the Nostalgia Critic, the damage and the reputation has already been done, given what we've learned about how they've conducted themselves with things like Too Boldly Flee. Yeah. So it's doable, but the damage has been done. So although he may be able to bounce back, if it's true that he left Channel Awesome, it's not going to be it's going to be an uphill battle, to say the least.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my carrying thoughts into the matter, is that I honestly think he probably could relaunch individually, but he'd have to do an apology first. I'm not necessarily saying he needs to give an apology out to people, but I think there's enough people on the Change the Channel cause that would want him to do it. And therefore, if he didn't do any kind of an apology, then they would immediately not come and support his channel. But I do know from doing some homework on this and other stories in the Change the Channel situation that there are enough people that don't want to hate the Nostalgia Critic. They want to continue watching the show. They just don't like the politics that have happened behind the scenes of the Nostalgia Critic, kind of thing. So at that's the issue that a lot of people have. So I think, in all honesty, what ultimately is going to happen is Doug and Rob need to pay Mike off, because there's no way that a prolonged legal process is going to be good for them. And I don't know how much that's going to take for them to pay him off, but they will have to pay him off. So then at that point, they get the Nostalgia Critic IP back. I agree with Alex. I think that I don't think it'll be a couple of years, though. I think they will probably have to wait as many as 5 years, and then retool the Nostalgia Critic and address all of these situations. So either make an apology or address the situation in some way or form, not the way that you addressed it before, but you need to address it and then relaunch the Nostalgia Critic, kind of thing, and see if people will actually take it. Now, do I think you're going to be able to do it the way that you've been doing it in the modern sense? No. You're going to have to go back to doing what you were doing before. And that's going to suck for you, but you're at a point where, like, I don't think individually they can hire Tamara. I don't think they can hire Malcolm, anything like that. And I don't think they should, because again, they're going to have to wait 5 years, up to 5 years to get this going, which means they're going to be using that money to live at that point. So that's what I think needs to happen in that situation, is that they need to wait a couple of years. They need to, I also agree with Alex. They need to go dark. Like, no Facebook, no Twitter, no nothing. You're done online for a good couple of years so that this can blow over. And then you come back gracious, you come back apologetic, and you relaunch. I don't even think, like, I kind of agree with Alex. I don't even think it's a good idea to relaunch Nostalgia Critic right off the bat. I think 5-minute movies, bum reviews, that's how you need to start. Before you relaunch the Nostalgia Critic and have whatever reaction you're going to have in that regard. Now, as much as I want to keep this to just this one story, enough of you guys have reached out that I do think we have to address this, but we're going to do it briefly. Okay. And that is, we didn't address this because there was no confirmation to it at that point. There has since been confirmation. And so now we have to address it. And that is, in the response that Channel Awesome gave, they kind of outed who the groomer of Channel Awesome was. The one that gets addressed in page 66, or at least they alluded to it. And some sleuths actually figured out that there was only one person that got released on the given day that chat log happened. And unfortunately, that leads to Justin Carmichael, aka Juwario, being the Channel Awesome groomer. And we've seen a number of YouTube channels address the situation. In some cases, the way that it literally went is that one day they lashed out. They absolutely lashed out because, unfortunately, Justin Carmichael committed suicide back in 2014. So a lot of people thought that this was just besmirching the reputation of a dead man. And then a day later, most of these guys would come back and they'd see the evidence that people were able to dig up, or they'd be able to talk to some people on the Change the Channel side and realize that it was in fact true. And they'd have to do some apologies. And so, like I said, I want to briefly address the situation. I actually spent a good portion of my weekend doing homework on this because, again, I did not want to be that guy. I did not want to be the guy who besmirches the name of a dead man. I didn't want to be that guy. Unfortunately, so I went and did my due diligence. I checked as many streams as I possibly could. I checked into the evidence that was being presented. I even went into the bowels of Reddit, where supposedly some of the victims of the Channel Awesome groomer had already surfaced, and read some of the testimony at that point. So I went so far, in fact, that people might notice, or people might remember last week, I was suffering from an infection. I probably bought myself an extra 2 days in that infection where antibiotics weren't doing anything. I was in such a slump of depression that I honestly, like when we were talking about Doug, I wasn't even wanting to talk about it because I just couldn't believe that this looks to be confirmed. And from what I've read, it is. It is pretty much confirmed. So let's just go down the panel. Romney, your take on the GNRO situation.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I was shocked because, again, GNRO was one of my favorite producers at Channel Awesome, and, well, now my enjoyment of his videos is thrown into question. And honestly, I think the video that addresses the situation perfectly is Mars Girl's video discussing her side of the story regarding what she knew, which she didn't know what was going on until the victim came forward when they were compiling the Not So Awesome document. And this is someone who devoted months to create the farewell tribute film, Farewell Fami Kamen Rider. Yep. And all of that work that went into that. And she was, you could tell visibly that she was distraught. She didn't know how to feel. Someone that she thought was her dear friend turned out to be an awful monster. And I think that pretty much summarizes a lot of people's reactions. I mean, when you consider that people did suicide awareness walks in his name, donated to charity in his name, only to find out that that is who he was. And even when people kind of looked at the psychology of what was going on in terms of people thinking, oh, he never appeared to be like a groomer or anything, but then people who had actually studied psychology realizing, oh, no, wait, that the behaviors are there. We just didn't notice them because you got charmed by the charisma. Simply put, I was shocked, I was blindsided, and I feel a little bit awful for knowing that I enjoyed his content, knowing that he was doing this kind of crap. So that's pretty much where I stand.
To kind of address the thing that you brought up is, like we didn't know that he was a monster or anything like that. I actually think, is it Pat Contry? Is that Pat the NES punk, Alex?
Yeah.
That's his last name?
Yeah.
I think he addressed it perfectly in the fact that we tend to forget as human beings that some of us, in fact, all of us, have a darker side. And there are things that we don't admit into the light of day for fear of whatever, like for fear of we actually might be breaking the law or for fear that society may frown on what we're doing kind of thing. So at that point, I think Pat kind of addressed it perfectly, is that it isn't necessarily that we knew a monster, guys. It's that unfortunately we saw one side of the mask. We saw the side of the mask that Justin wanted us to see. And that's the sad reality here. Like, I'm actually probably going to piss people off, like, when I get to my opinion, because I don't think Justin's a monster. I just think the bottom line is, unfortunately, he decided to live a duality-based life, and the darker side nobody ever got to see. And that's, while what he did could be considered monstrous, and I do agree with that concept, we all are flawed, and we all do things that we later on in life regret, or in some cases society regrets for us.
Yeah.
And that's, I think Pat put it perfectly, is that it's not necessarily that he was a monster. It's just that we didn't know the real person because Justin didn't want us to know.
Yeah, because apparently not even Justin's wife knew about any of this. Nope. And so someone who has lost her husband, is now learning that her husband was not a particularly good person.
Yeah.
That has got to hurt.
Yeah. In fact, that's actually one of the main reasons why I didn't want this to be true, because he did have a widow. He did have a widow. And at that point, I did not want to besmirch this man's name, knowing that the wife was out there and she would be hurt by any actions that any of us took. Kind of thing. Because GNRO is not going to get offended. GNRO's dead. But his wife and his family, they would be. And that's what I was trying to avoid there. Alex, your take on the situation.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think I have too much to add. I didn't really follow GNRO's content, and it's always sad to find out, unfortunately, some darker sides of somebody you might have admired or respected at one time. And, you know, I can't speak for the things he did, but I imagine he, not a perfect person, but you and I both pointed to the Pat Contry video, and I agreed a lot with Pat's sentiment on it. That you know, Justin had his demons and he had his problems, but he ultimately did try to have some good messages about him. So you gotta unfortunately take the good and take the bad with him.
Yep. My take on the matter is that, again, I agree with Pat's assessment that unfortunately in these situations, we didn't know the real person because the real person didn't want us to know who he was. He instead put on a mask and he played, you know, he's an entertainer. This is not as I actually get this question a lot of like, on my channel, like, do you play this entertainer? Do you play the radio host, or is this the real you kind of thing? And that's a hard line to try and explain to people. I can't entertain, and that does involve putting on a mask that I'm not necessarily who I am. What I try to convey in these podcasts is me as the real deal. And during the process, I'll show you some of the other masks that I put on. I put on my Sean Connery, and I try to entertain you. But unfortunately, some people actually do this kind of process for malicious means, whether they're aware of it or not. And Justin's is just another example of that actually happening. And the sad reality of this is that I also agree with Pat's assessment that in situations like this, there is really no such thing as a good guy or a bad guy here. Because the bottom line is that yes, Justin's actions were monstrous. Justin's actions victimized others and hurt the lives of others. But because of all of that stuff, it grays so much of the situation that you can't necessarily say there is such a thing as a white knight in that situation. People did what they felt was right at that given moment. In a lot of those cases, we've brought up that some of the Channel Awesome creators were either 18 or close to. And so at that point, they idolized him because he was older than them and because he was a creator like them. And even Pat kind of pointed out, like, when he did work for him, he was the most professional person there. But that's what Justin wanted people to see, unfortunately. The only thing that I've disagreed with, and this is I'm not necessarily criticizing or anything like that, because at this point there is no point to criticizing, is the fact that while I do believe that both Channel Awesome and the Change the Channel folks, in situations like this, there are usually two directives that you want to follow. And the first directive is you protect the victims. Bottom line, you make sure that they get whatever help that they need to be able to get through their everyday lives. If that means getting help, then that means getting help. If that means that they've been injured, then you get them to the doctor, kind of thing. And I do believe that both sides adhere to this one directive. I don't believe, and maybe it's just because they were too busy working on the first directive, I'm not sure, and my evidence doesn't prove the reasoning. The second directive that you have to follow here is that you ensure that there are no additional victims. And unfortunately, neither Change the Channel or Channel Awesome adhered to this directive, because it's one thing to terminate Justin. The next thing that should have been in that chat log is, unfortunately, notifying proper authorities, especially from a company standpoint, because you're liable. And that was surprising to me from the Channel Awesome perspective, is that there's no documentation saying that authorities were contacted. Or in the case of, I know this is going to piss off a lot of people, but this is literally my viewpoint, especially in a situation like this. You get one chance. You go and get some help. You learn from it. You implement that into your daily life. And if you can't do that, then unfortunately, there are no other chances. But this is what's going to piss people off. I do believe that, and from what I can tell, Justin didn't get that second chance kind of thing. He didn't get that first chance. So I think that the right course of action would have been to either get him that help or to contact proper authorities and make sure that no one else is hurt.
Yeah, but the problem there, and it's something that Marskull even pointed out, is that you could contact the authorities, but unless the victim decides to actually come forward of their own volition, then there's not a whole lot that the police can do. Because without a victim to say, yes, this happened to me, then legally they can't do anything.
And while I understand that, and I'm not pointing fingers here. I'm saying that this is unfortunately one directive that wasn't followed. And I hope, and this is honestly my sincere hope, that everybody involved here understands that perspective now too. Because again, we're talking about a lot of creators who weren't adults yet. Okay. They'd gotten their health classes and they knew one part of that equation. I'm not blaming. I'm saying that I hope that you learn from this, and this needs to be implemented from here on. And here's the thing. You don't have to go for help. I'm saying that's what I would do. Okay. Because I do believe that first chance needs to happen. But the bottom line is that wasn't adhered to here. And yeah, that's the other thing that I'm trying to figure out is like, how do you handle that? Do you handle that when he goes out to a con? Do you call his local authorities? I don't know. And and the concerning part to me, and again, there's nothing I can do on the matter, is this part was not adhered to. They were focused on the victims. And from what I understand, that's what they want to do. They wanted to be able to help the victims and make sure that they were okay. And you know what? Good on you. That's the way to do it. It's just unfortunate this whole situation is the way it is. And unfortunately, the sad reality is that everybody is scarred from it. Why? Because you'll not be able to unforget this. You'll not be able to unlearn this. There are people that this is going to be the rest of their lives, whether they were involved or not. Because I'm pretty sure people like Mars Girl are going to sit there and go, why didn't I know? Why didn't I see? That's unfortunately one of those things that is going to affect everybody the rest of their lives. That's the sad reality of a situation like this. So, I will say that personally, on my end, this revelation has actually, through no fault of any other creators, has kind of sullied my viewpoint on all of them. I don't know when I will watch another Atop the Fourth Wall right off the bat without thinking of this. I know I will. I just don't know when it's going to happen. And that's the sad reality of how things went for this situation. And I hope everybody gets the help that they need. And I hope everybody can move on. That's the best way to be able to say it. But yeah, that's pretty much thoughts on the Juario situation. And more importantly, I also, my thoughts go out to Juario's wife, because she's going to have to come to some very harsh realizations about things she didn't realize about her husband.
Yes, and that's the key thing to keep in mind, people, is that she didn't know about any of this. So she was not involved in any of it at all. She was completely oblivious. She did not know. That is how well Justin kept this hidden. Yeah. I mainly say that so that way people listening to the show aren't going to go after her, because she did not know. A lot of people didn't know. So don't harass her for it, because again, she had nothing to do with it.
The bottom line is, don't harass anybody on this. Okay. There's already more than enough victims created out of this. And victim's probably not the right word, but there's already more than enough collateral damage that has happened because of this situation. And that's the bottom line of it, is that unfortunately we all need to, whether you knew Justin, whether you watched his videos, I would simply say this too. I've seen a lot of people questioning whether or not to take any of his inspirational messages seriously or to take them to heart because of these revelations. I would point out this simple concept that the message, yeah, it may have been conveyed by a person with a darker side, but it doesn't harm the message. The message is still there and it's still clear as day. You can still be inspired by that and not I was about to say not condemn, but you can appreciate the message and not condone his actions. So don't worry too much about that. He still said something very inspirational that you can take to heart. It's just, you kind of wished he did. Truly. So I think that's probably the best way to end on this one. Final thoughts on this one before we move to the next story.
There's not much else to really say except that this is pretty fucked up.
I think that pretty much sums it up. And unfortunately, this is the end of an era. And it's not the end that a lot of people thought it might be. A lot of people expected Channel Awesome to go well beyond. And it's not. In fact, I actually think that because of situations like this, there will probably be backlash and reverberations that affect every single member, both old and new, of Channel Awesome. Whether it be that they just have to live with it, or some people just can't. That's something that they'll have to consider too. Moving on into the final story that we have tonight. I tried to find something to pick us up after the massive amount of depression. Now I'm really glad I waited a couple of days because I'm already starting to feel it again. So the next story that we're going to get into is somewhat uplifting in the fact that our buddy Steven Spielberg has actually decided to do the unthinkable and to take on a DC Comics movie. In particular, now people are already asking on that matter, if they don't know this story already, oh, does that mean he's taking on Superman? No, he's not. In fact, I think Steven would be happy not taking on any of the main DC guys. In fact, what he picked was perfect, as he is going to be working on the old World War II comic, Black Hawk. And we do have confirmation that David Koepp, who worked on Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, Jurassic Park, Lost World, War of the Worlds. Was he the guy who did Ready Player One, Alex?
No.
He was not. Okay. So Jurassic Park, Lost World, War of the Worlds, Indiana Jones 4. He penned the script for those, and he is going to be penning the script for Black Hawk. For those who don't know what Black Hawk is, I don't want to say it's a pulp hero, but it is a very old hero based in World War II. And it actually is not necessarily based around Black Hawk, but it's based around a unit of pilots who the leader of was Black Hawk. Mm-hmm. So at that point, we're basically looking at for lack of a better term, we're going to go and hunt the Red Baron kind of story.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
Because looking at it here, the Hollywood Reporter did post a follow-up article explaining who this team was. And basically, they're kind of like DC's answer to the Howling Commandos, where you basically have different soldiers from different parts of the world that team up together to fight Nazis. The gimmick with Black Hawk being that, and by the name of the unit, it's specifically the Black Hawk Squadron, is that they're a group of pilots that specifically pilot German planes and jets and basically storm and attack various Nazi outposts using their technology against them. And that's pretty much the best way to look at it. And with that description, it kind of makes sense why Spielberg would choose this idea, because he likes doing World War II dramas. I mean, we all know about Saving Private Ryan. He's done a number of war dramas. So if anything, this is probably the best title for him to tackle because it's right in his wheelhouse.
I'm glad that you brought up Private Ryan, because a lot of people say that the reason that this is perfectly in his wheelhouse is because he did the indie movies. And no, I'm not saying you're wrong. The indie movies did involve Nazis, but he has done war films. And so at that point, like, this is right in his wheelhouse, bottom line. I think this is more in his wheelhouse than trying to take on a superhero film. You could technically say he could do it. I mean, it's Steven freaking Spielberg. He could do it, but this is more in his wheelhouse, and therefore I think he's going to be a lot more comfortable taking on Black Hawk as opposed to, say, Batman. Now, the series did debut in Military Comics #1 back in 1941. And the comic, it was co-created by comic book legend Will Eisner, along with Bob Powell, Chuck Quidera, I think is how you say his name. And yeah, the comic was one of the biggest sellers of the 40s. So a lot of people, believe it or not, are excited about the fact that Black Hawk is going to be getting a film adaptation by the great Steven Spielberg.
Yeah, and believe me, DC needs a hit, because at this point, The only hit they've had so far has been Wonder Woman, so maybe they're hoping, especially when you consider the team dynamic that was created for Wonder Woman, they're hoping to think, okay, well, let's take that kind of team dynamic we had with Wonder Woman and see if we can make a whole movie that's just that, but set in World War II instead of World War I. And honestly, looking at the premise, I mean, it would have that nice balance of the Saving Private Ryan gritty action, but also the pulp-style adventure that we get from Indiana Jones. It's very much the best of both worlds here. Yep. And so my curiosity has definitely been piqued.
And the other interesting part of this is that given the development time and a number of other factors, this will probably debut when a few other pulp heroes that have been acquired by other studios. Now, some of them are in dispute right now, in particular Doc Savage. But some of those other pulp heroes are going to debut alongside Blackhawk. So at that point, you're looking at a year that is going to be based around the pulp heroes, the war heroes, all of that stuff that kind of set DC, not necessarily Marvel, but those other companies in their reputations, kind of thing. So this is probably going to be perfect for them. Alex, what is your take on this one?
I'm very interested to see what comes out of this, especially considering I don't know how gritty or real he'll go with it per se. He could either way. I mean, it is Spielberg, and I think Warner and DC will give him that latitude to work with. But just knowing that he's kind of wanted, since doing like Schindler's List, he's kind of never really wanted to go back to making sort of the Nazi villain Indiana Jones type, which is why he went with Cold War for Indy 5.
Yeah.
Or Indy 4, sorry. Indy 4, and I assume Indy 5 will probably be still another Cold War period.
I think that's actually the way to look at it, is that this is more in his wheelhouse, and he's going to be more comfortable doing this. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, there's been old school interviews where he would have loved to have done stuff like Blackhawk, like the old school serials that they used to see back in the day. And this is that. So at that point, this is his take on it. And I don't see this as a bad, especially in the fact that I don't even want to say this, but let's just say for the sake of argument, Steven Spielberg does this, it bombs, which is, Steven has had some questionable ones. So at that point, if it bombs, it's not entirely associated with DC. So like when people think DC, they think the superheroes, and therefore it's not going to be a splotch on that record. But at the same time, if he's successful with it, and it just so happens to be a DC property, it can elevate the overall film brand.
Yeah, but that raises the additional question: is how closely is Warner Brothers going to want this to tie to the DCCU? That's a good question. Given the precarious position it currently finds itself in, especially with the announcement that they're going to do one-off movies that aren't even connected to a larger universe, are they going to let this be a one-off that tells its own story, or are they going to try to tie it to the DC cinematic universe at large? We don't know that yet. It's still too early to tell. I can see it going either way. I guess it just depends on how much Spielberg would want it to tie into the DCCU.
Which, if I were to take a wild guess, I would say probably not. I think he just wants this to be his baby, and he doesn't have to worry about the continuity of other things. At that point, you have a good question. Like, how do you connect this? You can't really. There's no film based in World War II. And for those who are screaming out, "Oh, Wonder Woman!" No, Wonder Woman's World War I. So you can't do that. Maybe you could have a Wonder Woman reference, but I think it actually would hurt here.
Yeah,
I don't think because Wonder Woman's supposed to be in hiding at this point.
Well, yeah, and plus the key thing is that it could just be a reference, not so much like having her part of the plot. It could just be kind of a wink to the audience of, oh, hey, Wonder Woman was there during this particular moment. That would probably be the furthest you could go. Looking at this, the only other major DC hero you could tie this to, and it's a very big if, would probably be Alan Scott, the original Green Lantern, who was also, I don't remember if he was military during the initial Golden Age Green Lantern, but that would be like the only other character you could tie it to because of just the timelines, given that you could have it even be where, okay, maybe you just have a throwaway reference to maybe Alan Scott is like a private who tries to get into the Black Hawk Squadron but is rejected, and then that could lead to a separate movie where it's like, oh, and here's how he became the first Green Lantern of Earth.
But even then, that creates issues too, because the origin of his powers and the origins of the Green Lantern Corps are different. In fact, Alan Scott would be more of a magical superhero than anything else. To answer your question, though, I'm going to answer it in kind of a general way. Yeah, he probably was. I don't remember off the top of my head, but most heroes that originated around that time were either veterans of the war or they had active military ranks. So at that point, like, because you occasionally, it's like, and people actually have a problem with this in Indy 4, where he gets brought into the interrogation room and they call him Colonel Jones. And everyone's like, wait, what? You served in the war? Yeah, they don't have to show everything, guys. And in some cases, it could be an honorary rank. Like, people have seen MASH. Doctors started at like captain so they could do their job.
Yeah.
So
honestly,
you can technically have that.
And I mean, honestly, another way you could even have is like a throwaway reference as implying that that's part of the DC cinematic universe. You could just have a shot where one of the characters just happens to be reading an issue of the Daily Planet. You don't call attention to it. It's a newspaper that exists in the world of Blackhawk because the Daily Planet probably existed back then.
Exactly. Now, a concern that people have with the fact that Steven Spielberg is taking this on isn't necessarily towards his abilities. It's that he's probably setting himself for overwork. So right now, Steven Spielberg not only has Blackhawk, he just barely finished Ready Player One. And in fact, from what I understand, most of the crew for Ready Player One are going to help him with Blackhawk, but he's still on track to make Indiana Jones 5, which is supposed to be happening and begin production some point. And he's also working hard on the remake of West Side Story that people might remember we reported earlier on. And he's actually gone on the record saying he's working very hard to get leads. Now, people are already worried, is that too many projects for Steven Spielberg? It's tough to say. I think he's actually had way more projects than this in his prime. And so at that point, a man with experience could probably manage it better. Yeah. So I'm not necessarily worried at this point.
Yeah, now that just puts the idea in my head, maybe he's probably humming When You're a Jet while working on Blackhawk.
Can we get this on camera? Can we get this on behind the scenes? Because just for the record, I want to see Steven Spielberg hum. Because I don't think that's ever been shown on camera, has it?
I think there was an Indiana Jones interview where he did hum a little bit when they were talking about when they were working on the Indiana Jones thing.
Okay,
but,
all right.
Yeah, and so I just look at this and I'm just like, When You're a Jet, and I don't remember the rest of the lyrics, but I'm just like, we're talking about pilots, and then West Side Story with the jets.
Yeah. So at that point, I don't think it's going to overwhelm him. Alex, do you think that's going to be the case?
The dude's, every interview I still see with him today, he looks as spry as ever. So I think he'll be fine. Cool and
collected as he ever has.
Yeah. You and I were joking, like, on one of our reviews, on one of our Geek Drac and Shadow reviews, that we're pretty much convinced Spielberg is going to work till the day he dies.
Yeah, he's going to be a Shigeru Miyamoto situation, except Shigeru is going to get removed by security. He's just going to sit in his house and he's going to keep on making projects. And that's going to be the thing when he passes on, is that people will uncover these scripts and they will put it out, and they will be instant successes because they literally copied and pasted Steven Spielberg,
Well, that's not necessarily a guarantee. Again, case in point, AI, which was what Spielberg did for Kubrick. So it's a case where someone else is going to come along and basically do to Spielberg what Spielberg did to Kubrick.
Yeah, and that actually is the flaw. Is like a lot of people can agree that one of the reasons AI doesn't work is because Spielberg was trying to be Kubrick and he isn't Kubrick, kind of thing. So yeah, you're correct in that regard. But it would actually be funny if, basically, actually, you want to know what would be funnier is if he pulled a Ready Player One and throughout these scripts you find his hidden Easter egg throughout all of it, and if you find it, then you inherit his estate. This is not likely to happen, as his kids will inherit his estate.
Yeah. Plus, Howard Hughes.
Ready Player One, he downloaded his consciousness he downloaded his consciousness or uploaded his consciousness, and
this just in: Steven Spielberg has downloaded his consciousness to his movies.
Well,
you got to find Steven in Jurassic Park.
Honestly, I could see someone making a Da Vinci Code sort of story where a filmmaker has left clues throughout their various films they've made over the course of decades, and then it just turns out it leads to some sort of treasure guarded by the Knights Templar or something. Or for all we know, maybe it actually does tie to aliens, and Indiana Jones 4 was the clue he was trying to give us, is that he secretly found a space shuttle that he was holding for Nintendo because the aliens were waiting for them to fix it so they could give it back.
And the aliens, they weren't actual alien like the Greys that we've known for years. They were the Gophers in that movie. We keep this going, people.
Yes, we could.
We really could. And you know what? That would actually be a really great way to wrap things up for the evening, is to bring people up from the unfortunate stuff we just barely had to talk about.
Yeah. Especially when today's stores are making it all the more enticing to simply blaze it.
Yes. Final thoughts on this particular story. I'm excited. I think anything Steven Spielberg touches is at least worth a once over. Okay. I'm not saying that everything that Steven Spielberg has ever put out is, producing gold, but I think that he's earned enough of a reputation that it is worth seeing in the theaters to see if he got it right, to see if he can make it work. And if he didn't, then, it's just not your favorite Steven Spielberg movie. You go back to your favorites. Kind of thing. So yeah. I think it's at least worth it. And I don't think it's going to be hurting DC. I think at this point, it's just going to be getting Warner Brothers some money.
And some much needed credibility.
Yes. Alex, your final thoughts.
Yeah, I'm not worried about him overworking himself. I mean, just looking at his recent directorial work, I mean, he's pretty much had a movie just about every year. In 2011, he had both Warhorse and Lincoln out. That's within the same year. So the man, and like I said, every interview I see, the man is as spry as ever. He never looks like he's weathered.
Correct me if I'm wrong. It was either Jurassic Park or Private Ryan. One of them was paired with Schindler's List that given year. And so he's done this before. He's had films come out regularly throughout a year.
Yeah, Schindler's List and Jurassic Park both came out in 93.
Yeah,
the guy's a machine.
He really is, isn't he?
And on top of
if he's not working on movies, he's working on games. I mean, I've played Boom Blocks. I don't know about you guys. I played it it had Steven Spielberg's name to it. I had to play it.
That on top of the countless movies he oversees as executive producer.
Yeah.
Or at least just gets the ball rolling on. The man is busy, but never shows a day of his age. He's as spry as ever.
Yep. So I think this will work out for him. All right. Well, we are unfortunately running out of time, so we need to actually wrap things up for the evening. So if people want to reach out to us on the various stories that we covered, get our opinions on this, the only thing that I would ask, especially in light of the depressing stuff that we had to talk about with Channel Awesome, maybe don't come to us with that stuff. This is one of those things where we all need to, kind of move on and kind of assess where we feel individually on the situation. But if you want to reach out to us on those and other stories that we've covered in the past, all of that fun stuff, Alex the Shadow Blazer, how do they do that for you?
I'm on YouTube. Shadow Blazer 3000 is my channel, and I do anime reviews and other anime-related content and the occasional Let's Play. I'm on social media, on Twitter. That's where I always announce new videos coming out, at Alex J. Short, and I want to borrow Romney's shtick for a minute and give a recommendation of my own. That is, we've been talking about
that it is as Romney's shtick. It's just something that we haven't done and Romney does weekly.
I know, that's why I'm calling it a shtick now. So I'm gonna borrow Romney's spit for a bit. Didn't mean for that to go that way, but that's how it turned out. But we've been talking a lot, of course, about, unfortunately, our disappointments with learning revelations about certain Channel Awesome members. And, I want to recommend, for one, this happens to, of course, be a former Channel Awesome member, Lindsay Ellis. She's still doing YouTube video essays, a lot of it critique of film. Particularly right now, I want to recommend her 3-part The Hobbit, her analysis of the whole Hobbit trilogy over 3 videos. In particular, if you don't want to watch through the whole 3 themes because maybe you don't care, just her final words in part 3 from 28 minutes, 47 seconds through the end about what it feels like to kind of learn the unsavory truths about the media and why it stings so much. Obviously she had this planned out many months in advance and written out many months in advance, but the timing is just weirdly too perfect for it right now that her words just ring extra true.
Okay. And Stephen Romney, how do people get a hold of you?
Well, first I have to say, damn it, Alex, you took my suggestion. But luckily I have a backup.
You did take his shtick.
Yes, you took my shtick.
And now he gets to sue you for it. No, I'm kidding.
Well, like, he took the shtick and used it better. That's the thing. But luckily I have a backup. But to start from the beginning, my handle is Studio Ghost Utah. That is my handle both on YouTube and on Facebook. I upload videos to both. I haven't uploaded anything this month because, again, I'm currently trying to finish my novel that I started back in November. And as for this week's Romney's recommendation, I'm going to recommend... Oh, wait, almost forgot. I'm also Romney Reviews on Twitter. I always keep forgetting about Twitter.
So this is the problem, is like you used to be able to do this like on a stopwatch, but now things have changed.
Yes, a lot has changed. So yeah, Studio Ghost Utah, Facebook and YouTube. And my Twitter handle is Romney Reviews. And as for this week's recommendation, since Alex kind of beat me to the more sentimental one, I'm going to recommend something that's helped kind of keep me sane during this really, really awful week. And that is the King of Fighters Orochi Saga collection for PSP. Now, I've been on a bit of a fighting game kick lately, mainly because the novel I'm writing involves martial arts, and so I've been playing, well, I've been getting into the King of Fighters series, and what the Orochi Saga collection is a collection of the King of Fighters games from the original King of Fighters 94 all the way to the King of Fighters 98, telling the entirety of the Orochi Saga of the King of Fighters storyline. It's available for $20 on the PlayStation Store. If you have a PS3, simply get it on the PlayStation Store, download it to the PS3, and then hook it up to your Vita, copy it to the Vita, and you'll have a pretty good time. The thing that surprised me is that some of the mechanics of the King of Fighters actually hold up surprisingly well. I mean, this is for like higher level fighting game players though, so if your only exposure to fighting games has been, well, Smash Brothers and Dive Kick, you're going to be pretty overwhelmed. But if you want to get into the King of Fighters and want an affordable way to basically get, well, like 4 years worth of games all in one package, that's my recommendation, is the King of Fighters, the Orochi Saga collection, available on the PlayStation Store.
All right, and people want to get a hold of me. The best way to reach out to me on social media is on Twitter at Drac2326. You can also reach out to my YouTube channel's Facebook page at DracLP. You'll be able to see all of the content that I upload on a regular basis. In fact, I am back to regular schedule, so you guys can look forward to that. Except next week, and I've actually done an update video on this one, and it's just because I don't know if you guys have noticed, but I'm missing some stuff in the office, and so we have some things that are going to get moved in next week that are going to take my attention, so I'm probably not going to be able to do a regular schedule. But those are the best places to reach out to me, and you can check out my YouTube content aside from the podcast. I do Let's Plays, video game reviews, a number of other bits of content that you guys can check out. If you want to support the podcast directly, the first thing that we ask that you guys do above all else is support the RSS feed. So you can do so at geekyweek.podomatic.com, or you can look up Geek News, Reviews, and Opinions or the GNRO podcast on iTunes or Google Play for Android users and be able to get the RSS feed onto your phones and be able to listen at your leisure. I know that the RSS feed is a little backed up right now, and trust me, it's getting worked on right now. I actually have a couple of episodes that I need to upload in the next few days, so you guys will get up to speed on that. But first and foremost, please support the RSS feed. That's how we know that you're there. That's how we know that you guys like what we're doing. And feel free to leave commentary or stuff that you think we can improve on. We're always open to listen to that. You can also submit stories and feedback to geekyweek@gmail.com, and we do actually utilize those. In particular, there are a few stories this week where we did utilize you guys' feedback and your wanting us to talk about specific matters. And then you can also follow the podcast on social media under the exact same tagline, Geeky NRO, either on Twitter or on Facebook. And you'll get up-to-the-minute information when we're going live, the stuff we'll be talking about, the interesting events that we actually will be having, things like that. And with that, I actually do have another thing to announce, is that unfortunately, we will not be doing the podcast next week. And the reason being is that we actually are going to be getting together to do a group review. It is time once again, everybody, for a group review on the recently released at that point, Avengers Infinity War. So you guys can look forward to that. It's just not going to be happening on Friday, but it will be up on the RSS feed soon after it is recorded. So you guys can look forward to that. But we will not be recording the podcast live next week. And in fact, this summer is probably where you're going to start seeing us trying out some of the other avenues to get the podcast live out to different mediums, in particular Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, things like that, just to be able to try those out, because YouTube is becoming more and more a place where we can't host this stuff. They just really don't want us here. So with that being said, that's going to go ahead and do it for this evening. So we thank you guys so much for your love, for your support, for your patience, for your for your awesomeness that you guys continue to thrust upon us. We really do appreciate that. I want to thank my panelists for having to put up with a lot of the negative stuff that we had to talk about this week. And like I said, we won't be back next week, but the following week we will return for even more geek news, reviews, and opinions. So for me, for Alex, and for Romney, we'll see you guys next time. Take care.